In this video session we will look at income and substitution effects of a price change. In the chapter dealing with utility, we looked at the utility approach and the indifference approach, if you can remember, and we now focus on the indifference approach, where we use indifference curves and budget constraints or budget lines to determine whether consumer is in equilibrium. Now, one of the major advantages of the indifference approach or indifference curves analysis is that you can basically graphically analyze the income effect and the substitution effect of a price change. So we're going to basically first look at the two effects, what is an income effect and what is a substitution effect of a price change. We will focus on if the price of a certain product decrease. And I've placed on the Moodle site, additional notes on this. So please go to the chapter, and there's some additional notes on this topic. So what is important is that we can use, the indifference curve analysis to graphically analyze the income effect and the substitution effect of a price change. So let's assume that the price of a good decrease. Now, what will happen now? When the price of a good falls, right, and the price of all other goods remain constant, and also if consumers, the price of all other goods remain constant, and also the nominal income, that is the money income of a consumer, remain constant, what is then the effect on the real income of a consumer? And that is the income effect. Now, real income means basically, what can you buy with your money, how much goods and services you can buy. And, over the last couple of years, because of inflation rate increasing, our real income has been declining. Our nominal income, our salaries haven't been keeping up with with inflation. So if the price of a good decrease, what will then happen with our real income, under the assumption that prices of all other goods remain constant and the nominal income of consumers, or also the money income, remain also constant. So what will happen with the real income if prices decrease? It means that the effect is that because real income will definitely increase, because now the price has decreased, so the consumer can buy more of this good in comparison with other goods, because the prices of other goods remains constant. So real income has increased, and then because of real income, and we assume that we're only dealing with normal goods. We know there are normal goods and inferior goods, but we will only focus on normal goods, and I will only test you in the test or in the exam on a normal good. So if the price goes down of a normal good, what happens, of the quantity demanded of that good will increase, and because of what? Because of the real income has increased. So basically there will be an increase in the consumption of this good, say good X, whatever, right? And that good is a normal good, not an inferior good. So this is the income effect of a price change. Remember, we only focus on a price decrease. Price increase can also be done, but I will only test you on the price decrease. Now, that is the income effect of a price change. Now, again, if the price of the product decrease, what is the substitution effect? If the price of a product decrease relative to other products, then it means that and other products' prices remain the same. Then what is the sum or the conclusion that we can draw from that is that this product becomes then relatively cheaper than other products. So if this product becomes relatively cheaper than other products, then what effect will it have on the consumption or the purchases of this good? So it means that, say for example, there are two products, bread and meat. So say for example, if the price of if we look at if the price of meat has decreased, what will then happen? The consumer will buy more meat and less bread, because the price of bread has gone, or meat has gone down. Let's look at the example, and then the other product is bread. So relative to bread, the price of meat has decreased, and then meat becomes relatively cheaper than bread. So what will the consumer then do? He will substitute meat for bread, and that is a substitution effect because of the price decrease, right? So these are the two effects that price decrease can have. And then basically, if you go back to the first one, because of the income, the real income increasing, the consumer will buy more meat, for example. And because of the price of meat coming down relative to bread, the consumer will also buy more meat, which is a normal good, right? Okay. So out of this price decrease, there will be a greater consumption of meat taking place, right? So what I've done now is explain the income and the substitution effect of a price change. Now the advantage of indifference curves analysis is that we know the price has decreased, and what has happened now with the quantity demanded of meat has increased. This is meat. Because of the income effect, that is the real income has increased, and because of the substitution effect, okay? Because meat becomes relatively cheaper than bread. So this whole income and substitution effect, this is what we call the price effect, the whole price effect. And basically what happens is that the quantity demanded has increased, more meat will be purchased because of this, okay? Now, what this analysis, able us to do, or we can now graphically separate the income effect and the substitution effect of a price change, or of this decrease in the price. We can do it graphically. Now, this one is a bit complicated for students, so what I'm going to do is also in the additional notes you will find the diagram there. So we start off with a diagram. And then what we measure on the vertical axis is the quantity of bread. So that is bread, okay? So the quantity of bread is on the vertical axis, and then the quantity of meat. So we can say QM or QB, okay? Quantity bread, quantity meat, okay? So where do we start off? We're going to use now budget lines and indifference curves to separate the income and the substitution effect of this price decrease or price change. So where do we start off? We start off with the original budget line. We draw the original budget line, right? Okay. Now let's label the original budget line. That is Q bread and Q meat. So that is the original budget line, right? And then the consumer, where's the consumer in equilibrium, where the highest indifference curve is tangent to the budget line. So in this example, we draw an indifference curve, okay, which is tangent to the budget line. And in the additional notes, they use U, but let's use I. So that is indifference curve 1. So where the highest indifference curve is tangent to the budget constraint or the budget line, say at this point, that will be point A. Now, in terms of where we started off the original budget line, tangent means touching the highest indifference curve. At this point, the consumer is in equilibrium. This is where we start off, right? Okay. Now, then let's suppose that the price of meat decreases. Okay. Now, what effect will this have on the budget line? And remember, in previous video sessions, we mention and we illustrate if there's a change in the price of the product, or in the income of the consumer, what will happen with the budget line? Now, if the price of meat falls, right, what will happen with the budget line? And that is basically, what will happen with the consumer's indifference curve. So, if you look at the original budget line, because of the price of meat has fallen, what will happen now with the budget line? It will swivel outwards. So you have to draw now, remember, the consumer will now buy more meat. Okay, so bread remains constant. So there will be more meat that will be bought by the consumer. So you have to draw it, it will start there, and then that will be your new budget line. It swivel to the right, because there's more meat that will now be purchased because of the drop in the price. So what is happening now is that the consumer will now be on a higher indifference curve because of what? From A to B, you can see there, the consumer will now be on a higher indifference curve, and we can now draw another, this is the new budget line. So where is the consumer now in equilibrium? Where the new or the highest indifference curve is touching the new budget line. So we can draw it maybe there. So that will be, say, point B. And this will be indifference curve number 2. So basically what then happens is that because of the decrease in the price, the consumer is now on a higher indifference curve, at a higher consumer equilibrium. Okay? So this whole point from A to B basically is what we call the basically what we call the price change. The consumer is now buying more meat. Now let's just look at when the consumer was at point A, the consumer buy M1 quantity of meat. Now what happens now? When the price decrease, what happens now? Because of the price change, the consumer is buying more meat, M2, right? So this whole effect is the effect of the price change. The lowering of the price means that the consumer is purchasing more meat from M1 to M2. And the consumer is now on a higher indifference curve, so the consumer equilibrium moved from A to B. Okay? So this is the first thing that you need to understand, right? So the movement from A to B, that basically is what we call the price effect. The effect of the price decrease is that the consumer is buying more meat, right? And the budget line swivel outwards, right? From QB, QM, and then we can then say QB, and this is, for example, where it intersects there, QM dash, right? Okay, or Q dash M. Okay, so this is your new budget line because of the decrease in the price. Okay, so the new point of consumer equilibrium is moving from A to B, right? So the increase in the consumption of meat is depicted by movement from A to B and from M1 to M2. Now what we can, that is the whole price effect of the decrease in the price, right? But now because of indifference curves analysis, the advantage is that we can now separate. Remember, the price effect consists of what we call an income effect and a substitution effect. Now, indifference curve analysis allows us to split this whole movement from A to B into two. That means into an income effect and a substitution effect. And this is, what we can do in terms of, using indifference curves analysis. Now, to separate it, we have to now draw what we call an auxiliary line. Now, the auxiliary line, that is an additional line. That is just a tool that economists are using. The additional line is ZZ, right? Now, economists use this additional line just to separate the income effect and the substitution effect of a price change, right? So it's just a tool that they use, like a curve or whatever. So where is this auxiliary line? This auxiliary line will be drawn parallel to the new budget line. Remember, the new budget line is QB, Q-M, right? So it will be drawn parallel, and it will be tangent also there, if you look at that, to the original indifference curve, which is I1. So when we draw it, we must be careful. It will start there, and then it will be tangent to the indifference curve there. So let's look at it, or the original budget line, in fact. So tangent means it's parallel, or not the tangent, it's parallel to the new or to the new budget line. So if you draw it, and then it will be right, that will be Z. Okay, so this will be ZZ. That is your auxiliary line. Now, if ZZ is parallel to QM1, that is the new budget line, then it simply means is that because it's parallel, then the slope doesn't change, it's the same. And the price ratio is exactly the same, right? Okay, so it simply means that when we look at where it's tangent there at this point, where it's at point C, then basically what happens at point C, the ZZ line is tangent to the original indifference curve, which is I1. So at that point will be point C. Okay, if you can, this point will be point C. Okay. Now you will see now why we draw the auxiliary line, because the auxiliary line is there to separate the income effect from the substitution effect. So yeah. So where will this auxiliary line now be? If you look at M2, if you look at B, that is M2, and if you look at point C, this is point C, then you come down, that will be M3. Okay? If you can see there, where we're at point A, that is the original quantity of meat that was purchased, and then because of the price decrease, we move from A to B, and M2 quantity of meat is now being purchased, right? So I know this is a complicated figure, but it does. It's not supposed to be. So what is now the movement? There's a movement from A to C, and that movement from A to C is on the same indifference curve. Now that means that the movement from A to C cannot be because of a change in income. It can be because of the price ratio have changed, right? The movement from A to B is what? That is because of the price effect. But we will come now from A to C and C to B. So firstly, we look at C to B. What is the movement from C to B? That means from M3 to M2. So there is from M1 to, if you look at M1 to M3, and from M3 to M2. So there are two movements here. Okay. Remember, in the end, the consumer is buying now M2 meat from M1. But we split this movement from M1 to M2 into two. A movement from M1 to M3 and from M3 to M2. Now what is the movement from M1 from A to B? That is the whole price effect, right? But then if you look at the movement from say C to B, this movement from C to B, what is this movement? The movement from C to B will be what? That will be your income effect, okay? So from C to B, this movement is your income effect, or from M3 to M2, that is your income effect. And this is why we draw the auxiliary line ZZ, which is parallel to the new budget line. So it simply means that any possibility that the movement from C to B is due to price changes is eliminated, because it's parallel. The ZZ is parallel to the new budget line, so it means that the price ratios remain the same, right? There isn't a change in the price ratio. So the movement from, as we mentioned here, from C to B, that is your income effect, from M3 to M2, okay? And because it's drawn parallel, it means that the slope remains the same, and if the slope of a budget line is determined by the price ratios, it means that if the slope remains the same, is drawn parallel, then there's no change in the price ratio, okay? So that is your first movement from C to B, that is your income. From C to B, that is your income effect of the price change. And then the movement from A to C. Now A to C is on the same indifference curve, the original indifference curve. It's tangent, point C. So the movement from A to C, what can we say about that? There's a different price ratio, right? And at point C, the new price ratio applies. And then because of the decrease in the price, meat becomes relatively cheaper than bread. So at point C, meat is now relatively cheaper than bread. So what we are saying, from A to C, what effect is that? That is the substitution effect of the price change. Okay? And it cannot be because of the income effect, because the income effect, if in the case of the income effect, the slope remained the same, the price ratio remained the same, but at point C, the price of bread is now, or the price of meat is relatively cheaper than bread. So the movement from A to C, that is the substitution effect, and the movement from B to, or from B to C, or from C to B, that is the that basically the income effect is the movement from C to B, and from A to C, that is your substitution effect. So just to summarize, is that because of the price decrease, the quantity of meat being purchased increased from M1 to M2. That is the whole effect. That means from A to B. But what about the movement from say from C to B? And that is where we bring in the auxiliary line. That is the income effect of the price change. Because the slope remained the same, there is no change in the price ratio. What about the movement from A to C? That is a substitution effect, because it's on the same indifference curve, and now at point C it means that meat becomes relatively cheaper than bread. So, you know, indifference curve analysis allows us to graphically illustrate the whole price effect from A to B, and to split it and to separate it into a substitution effect at the beginning, and then into an income effect. And these two effects reinforce itself, right? So basically what we are saying, in the case of a normal good, it means that as the price decreases, the quantity demanded of that normal good will increase, and that is from M1 to M2. But now we can split it, we can separate it into the substitution effect at the beginning and the income effect then later on. And in the end, you will see if there's a decrease in the price of meat, it means that the quantity demanded of meat will increase, and that is also consistent with the law of demand. Okay, and that concludes then this may be complicated, you know, effect, but I can test you in the exam or in the upcoming semester test on it. Thank you.